London in the 1600s was already one of the biggest cities in Europe, with a population close to 500,000 people. It was a crowded, fast-growing city shaped by trade, river traffic, and constant movement along the Thames. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring old paintings and engravings to life, letting us shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through the same scenes in ways the original artists never could. First, I want to talk about what we now call Old London Bridge, a structure I didn't know nearly enough about before starting this research. By the 1600s, Old London Bridge was much more than a river crossing. It was a tightly built street hanging above the River Thames, linking the city of London to Southwark. Houses, shops, warehouses, chapels, and gatehouses lined the bridge so completely that, from a distance, it looked less like a bridge and more like a continuous neighborhood stretching across the water. The bridge rested on a series of narrow stone arches supported by massive piers. These squeezed the tidal flow of the Thames beneath them, creating powerful currents that made travel dangerous. River traffic trying to pass through the arches faced strong surges of water, and accidents were common. The buildings on the bridge rose several stories high, often sticking outward over the roadway, and residents lived above the constant movement of carts, horses, and pedestrians below. Fire was a constant danger. Crowding was unavoidable, and yet people kept living and working here for generations. Crossing Old London Bridge meant passing not only through a busy business route, but also beneath clear reminders of authority and control. Below, the Thames served as London's main highway. Barges, ferries, merchant ships, and smaller riverboats packed the water, carrying grain, timber, coal, cloth, and imported goods. The river connected London to England's interior, to Europe, and to the wider Atlantic world, making the bridge a place where local life and global trade met. In severe winters, the restricted flow beneath the bridge's arches could help the river freeze. During these rare times, the Thames briefly changed, with people walking and gathering on the ice below the bridge, a striking contrast to the danger the river usually presented. This view shows the northern entrance to the bridge, approached through the area beside St. Magnus the Martyr's Church, visible to the left. By the mid-18th century, the bridge had fallen into such bad condition that officials decided to clear and remodel it. And between 1756 and 1762, the buildings that had crowded Old London Bridge for centuries were gradually torn down. Although the painting dates from the 1700s, it shows a crossing that had already shaped London for centuries. Remarkably, this is a place you can still visit today. What makes Old London Bridge remarkable is not only its engineering, but also its long life as a lived-in space. It worked at the same time as infrastructure, marketplace, neighborhood, and symbol. Kings and common people crossed it. Traders and workers labored on it, and newcomers arriving in London first met the city at this narrow crossing. Old London Bridge was crowded, dark, and often unsanitary. It slowed traffic, squeezed trade into a bottleneck, and created constant dangers for those who lived and worked on it. Yet for centuries, it remained essential. Until the 18th century, it was the only permanent crossing of the Thames in central London, making it unavoidable for travel north or south across the city. Sometimes I wish I could step back and experience this place as it once was, even for just a single day. For now, I guess this AI reconstruction is as close as I can get to that dream. This is Buckingham House in the late 17th and early 18th century. Long before it became Buckingham Palace, it was originally built as a private townhouse on the western edge of London. It stood away from the city's crowded centre, surrounded by open land and gardens. At the time, this area marked the boundary between city London and the countryside beyond, a reminder that even as the city grew more crowded, its limits were still clearly felt. In September 1666, London was hit by one of the most devastating fires in its history. What began as a small blaze quickly spread through a city built mostly of timber, with narrow streets and crowded buildings, turning the fire into an unstoppable force. The first image shows Ludgate in flames, with old St. Paul's Cathedral visible in the distance, its squared tower already in danger. Soon, even this huge landmark would be destroyed. The second view looks across the Thames near Tower Wharf on the evening of September 4th. London appears as a continuous wall of fire. To the left stands London Bridge, while to the right, the Tower of London narrowly escapes destruction. Old St. Paul's burns at the centre of the skyline. In just a few days, much of medieval London was reduced to ash. Yet the fire marked a turning point, clearing centuries of dense building and forcing the city to rebuild, reshape, and begin again. Rising above the river, the Tower of London in the 1600s stood at the centre of royal power. By this time it served as a fortress, an arsenal, a treasury, and one of the most notorious prisons in England. Important prisoners accused of treason were held inside its walls. The tower also held royal records, weapons, and even the crown jewels, strengthening its role not just as a place of punishment, but as a foundation of the English state. This scene shows Cheapside in 1638, one of London's most important ceremonial streets, during the procession of Marie de' Medici as she entered the city to visit her daughter, Queen Henrietta Maria, and King Charles I. Cheapside was not only a commercial street, but also a stage for royal display, lined with conduits, crosses, and temporary structures for public events. At the center stands the Cheapside Cross, a familiar landmark and meeting place. While soldiers, officials, and crowds fill the street beneath the celebration, moments like this showed growing political and religious tension, as Henrietta Maria's Catholic faith and foreign background unsettled a city already drifting towards civil war. Today, the same stretch survives as modern Cheapside in the City of London near St. Mary-le-Bow, a place where the street remains even though the medieval landmarks have disappeared. This image shows the political and religious centre of Westminster in 1647, seen from across the River Thames at a time when England itself was deeply divided. On the left stands the old Palace of Westminster, the home of Parliament and the centre of political power. By the mid-17th century, it had become the main focus of growing conflict between the monarchy and Parliament, especially during the years of the English Civil War. Just beside it rises Westminster Hall, one of the oldest and grandest surviving parts of the palace, used for courts of law, state trials, and major public gatherings. Its huge roof symbolized royal authority long before it became a place for challenging that authority. To the right stands Westminster Abbey, the spiritual heart of the nation. For centuries, it had been the site of coronations, royal funerals, and the burial place of kings and queens, adding a sacred meaning to monarchy. In 1647, the abbey stood uneasily between tradition and upheaval, as religious divisions reshaped England's institutions. At the center of the scene are Westminster Stairs, a busy river landing where travelers arrived and left by boat. In an age before bridges and paved roads dominated travel, the Thames served as London's main route, carrying politicians, clergy, messengers, and citizens straight to the doorstep of power. This etching shows the Palace of Whitehall in 1643, then the largest royal residence in England and the main home of the monarch. From these river-facing steps, kings and courtiers arrived by boat, showing the Thames as London's main route of travel and power at the heart of the Stuart court. Stretching along the Thames, Whitehall was not one single palace, but a huge complex of halls, chambers, and government buildings where royal rule was carried out. Most of Whitehall was destroyed by fire at the end of the 17th century, and today only the banqueting house remains, standing as the last piece of what was once the centre of royal life. This is Richmond Palace in the 16th and early 17th centuries, one of the most important royal residences outside central London. Originally rebuilt by Henry VIII on the site of an earlier medieval manor, Richmond became a favourite retreat for Tudor and early Stuart monarchs, offering cleaner air and space away from the crowded city. It was here that Elizabeth I spent her final days, dying at the palace in 1603, marking the end of the Tudor dynasty. Over time, the palace stopped being used and was gradually taken apart, and today, its grounds are part of modern Richmond, with only traces of its walls and layout surviving beneath the streets and riverside paths. Standing here, looking back at these moments, it's hard not to feel how close the past really is. These streets, these buildings, and these events shaped the world we live in. And through these reconstructions, we get just a small glimpse of what it was like to be there. If there's another city, another moment in time, or a historic scene you'd like to see brought back to life, let me know in the comments. I'd love to keep building this journey into the past with you again. Thank you so much.